Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, striking up the live stream on a Friday afternoon to talk some Pac-12 football, some Pac-12 scheduling. So I have previously released my schedule fix for the ACC, the Big Ten, and the SEC. We don't have to touch the Big 12 because, of course, everyone plays everyone, so they have the perfect championship formula there. And the rest of the conferences, it matters who you schedule, because it just matters, because some teams have a light break, a light touch, and other teams have to deal with the best teams in the other division, and it's not competitive or fair, and it can be fixed. And please check out the videos from the Big Ten, the ACC, and the SEC, which were closed videos, meaning I just recorded and gave my take and then had you respond. But I just figured I'd strike up the live stream just for a few minutes as I run through my Pac-12 schedule fix. And you can comment on this or anything else that you have. If you caught the live streams last night, they involved Ohio State with Steve Hellwagon from 24/7 Sports, Michigan Talk, and most notably, we talked across the nation with Steve Deace from Michigan Podcast, and he gave a great Woody Hayes, Earl Bruce story at the conclusion of the discussion. So if you're into old-time college football and nostalgia and classic storytelling, check out the Steve Deace story at the end of the Michigan podcast with him, which we didn't really even address Michigan football. It was about national college football. Also last night, James Coleman from Florida State talking Gridiron Now, talking Florida State from Gridiron Now. And let's see, who else did we have on last night? Jordan K., Arizona State from House of Sparky. And so please check out those videos from our live stream on Thursday night. And how could we forget Cam Underwood, State of the U, talking Miami? All right. So again, what I've endeavored to do here is take the conference scheduling in the 5 major conferences, throw out the Big 12, so the other 4, because they have scheduling issues, and I've tried to make it more competitive, given equality to the scheduling. So right now in the Pac-12, in particular, Stanford and Washington have an issue, and they're most likely the 2 best teams in the Pac-12 North Division. Stanford plays 4 other teams in the other division. So the Pac-12, unlike the ACC and the SEC with an 8-team, 8-game schedule, and even the Big Ten with a 9-game schedule because of the 14-team leagues, the Pac-12 is much more equitable than the other 3 conferences because it's a 12-game league. It's a 12-team league, and it's a 9-game schedule. So everybody plays everyone within the division. Then you play 4 of the 6 teams, so you're only missing 2 opponents in the conference. So there's much more equity in the scheduling in the Pac-12, but there's still work to be done. Specifically, Stanford, Washington. The 4 teams that Stanford play from the Pac-12 South this season, USC, Utah, Arizona State, and UCLA, basically the 4 best teams in the league in the division, went 21-15 last year. Washington takes on Utah, Arizona State, and UCLA and Colorado. So there's no USC in there. So Washington's 4 opponents went 15-21. I will monitor the chat in case you've got some comments and questions. So we want to even that out. So in a perfect world, everyone in the Pac-12 would play 4 teams from the other division that combined to go 18-18 the previous season. What we have is Stanford taking on a schedule of 21-15 and Washington 15-21. Distinct advantage for the Huskies there, and basically not playing USC while Stanford has to deal with the Trojans. For Washington State, perfect, 18-18. Oregon, perfect, 18-18. Out of division scheduling. For Cal, it's 19-17 for Oregon State. The poor Beavers have to take on Arizona, USC, Colorado, and Arizona State, but that turns out to be an 18-18 non-division schedule. For USC, they play Stanford, Washington State, Cal, and Oregon State. That's a 15-21 composite out of division schedule. The ends of the spectrum in terms of easy and difficult in the Pac-12 South is totally out of hand. Utah is facing Stanford, Washington, Washington State, and Oregon. These are the 4 best teams in the other division. They miss Oregon State. They miss Cal. They've got the 4 best teams: Stanford, Washington, Washington State, and Oregon. So Utah's 4 non-division games, those 4 teams went 24-12 last year. Compare that directly to Arizona, who plays the opposite schedule, if you will. Arizona has Washington State, Oregon, Cal, and Oregon State. Those 4 teams went 12-24. So what I have done is I have created a schedule in which everyone plays 4 teams in the other division that went in the range of 17-19, 18-18, 19-17. You can hit a mark of that range of scheduling. It doesn't have to be as bad as Arizona playing 4 teams from the North Division that went 12-24 last year, and Utah having to face the 4 best teams in the North who went 24-12. It doesn't have to be that way. There's really only one cross-division rivalry, and that's Stanford and USC. So some people would argue that Stanford and USC need to face each other every year. But other than that, there is a lot of play in this schedule because you're facing 4 teams in the other division. There's no reason not to get it close to an equitable, close to 18-18, 500 schedule for everyone in the Pac-12 so we can have a competitive balance for competition to win divisions. All right, let's strike up the live stream and see what you've got. Anything on college football? Otherwise, I'll just wrap it up and leave it as the Pac-12 schedule fix right there. And again, we address the SEC, the Big Ten, and the ACC that have many more issues. The SEC in particular has one team in Tennessee taking on 14-2 Auburn and Alabama non-division, and Vanderbilt taking on 2 teams that went 4-12, I believe, Ole Miss and Arkansas. So it gets pretty bad. All right, Navy Thomas, Pac-12 games come on way too late. Kind of really sucks for us being in the Midwest and the East Coast. Wish they would play earlier. Earlier would help their viewership, and it would. And I believe that they try to play most of the big games in the primetime slot for the East Coast, the 8 o'clock slot. So you see a lot of Stanford, USC type of games being played at 8 o'clock Eastern time, or they fill that 3:30 Eastern slot, 12:30 on the West Coast. So the Pac-12 is just in a disadvantage in regards to scheduling because they want to schedule some night games locally. And so you see kind of the mid-tier games being played at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night on the East Coast. So Navy Thomas, think of it this way as well. For us that don't mind staying up late on a Saturday night to watch college football, this is the time when we can zero in and focus on the Pac-12 because they're the only game in town at 11 o'clock at night. You're going to see Washington State versus Oregon. You're going to see Arizona, UCLA late night on a Saturday night. So if they do play more games in that 3:30 or 8 o'clock window on a Saturday afternoon, East Coast time, then they're going to have to compete against the SEC, the Big Ten, and the ACC, and the Big 12. They're going to have to compete against the 4 other conferences. So while most people want to go to bed on a Saturday night, or they're out on a Saturday night and missing the Pac-12, on the other hand, it's the opportunity for them to be the only college football choice late night instead of trying to knock heads with the other 4 major conferences. And, you know, who's going to win out if Stanford and USC play at 3:30 in the afternoon, but they're going up against Alabama, LSU, Clemson, Florida State, and Ohio State and Penn State. It's going to be difficult, at least in that we know that they're going to own the West Coast. And for those people in the other time zones that love college football, want to take it in late night, Saturday night, they have to watch the Pac-12, unless you want to dive into the Mountain West and the other conferences. But if you want to watch the best teams available, you're watching the Pac-12. Remember, Texas A&M and Georgia canceled games with Oregon. Yeah, so we will deal soon with the non-conference scheduling. We're looking at the conference scheduling within the 4 major conferences other than the Big 12 because there's nothing to talk about there. 9 games against 9 opponents. But believe me, non-conference scheduling. So I've worked out a non-conference schedule, and I'll give you the formula soon. Jamie says, because we will win a lot of games this year, and please, people will say we have a soft schedule. So we being Oregon, I believe, and don't have their schedule in front of me. I've got their conference schedule. Oregon takes on Arizona, UCLA, Utah, and Arizona State out of the Pac-12 South. So that's a pretty fair schedule. Those four teams went 18-18 last year. Oregon obviously just concluded a home and home with Nebraska, losing 2 years ago in Lincoln, winning the game in which they grabbed the big lead 42-14 and then held on for dear life in Eugene last year. Oregon, Ohio State coming up home and home soon, but Oregon, I don't know who they have non-conference. I don't have it right in front of me this year. Jamie, good to see you. Navy Thomas as well. Yeah, just getting caught up on everything we produced last night. Again, we focused on Florida State, Ohio State, a national conversation, even though we brought on Steve Dace from Michigan Podcast. We dealt with the nation, didn't talk so much Michigan football, although he had a great Woody Hayes, Earl Bruce story at the end of that talk. And again, Ohio State, Florida State, Arizona State, and Miami featured on Thursday night. And we will, of course, have tons more for you as the next series. Now that I got the scheduling out of the way, at least in terms of the conference scheduling, I'm going to focus on non-conference scheduling, give you my formula and why that will be good or would be good for college football. And then I'm going to look at the quarterback situations across the country. Of course, Joe Burrow is a free agent, possibly to Nebraska, Florida, LSU, Cincinnati as well in the mix if he wants to stay close to home, being about 2 hours away from Cincinnati. But looking at the quarterback situations and battles across the country, we're going to give our odds of who's going to win those quarterback battles as we get close to August. And we've got a number of series. If you want to know what we're up to and what we're planning over the next several months, I ask that you just go to the front page of my YouTube channel, and we've kept it up as a trailer, our channel update. So that will give you everything you need to know in regards to what we've got planned for content. And if you have any suggestions, bring them on. I will take them and hopefully get to them very soon. Thoughts about the Ole Miss players getting immediate starts this year? Well, it seems pretty obvious, Navy Thomas, that Shea Patterson and his case resulting in eligibility immediately for 2018 was going to result in what we see the rulings over the past day for a number of players. I looked up these players, looked at their experience. We're all talking about guys that have seen the field, but not impact players in the past, not guys that were starters, but they saw the field. They made some tackles. One guy, defensive back with an interception, a wide receiver transferring who has a reception to date. So off the top of my head, we've got Ole Miss players, Navy Thomas referring to, that have received immediate eligibility at Houston, South Alabama. We've got Nebraska in the mix, and some other teams that I don't remember. Georgia Tech gains an offensive lineman from Ole Miss. It is sad Arizona does not play Washington or Stanford. Apart from possibly USC, they are the best team in the South. Yeah, they were last year. We will see if Chip Kelly's magic works in 1 year. And Arizona State, of course, was 7-5 during regular season play last year and have quarterback Manny Wilkins back. Arizona State people seem to think that they're going to take a bit of a pullback and not necessarily take a step of progress this first season under Herm Edwards. They have some depth issues at Arizona State, so they may drop back a win or two. Please check out, if you're interested in scheduling, we talked SEC and ACC future schedules recently. Those videos are posted, so we went far into the future. We looked at 2018 through whenever the games are scheduled, the contracts are signed. And that's very interesting and intriguing to me to look ahead to see what those big games are going to be. And I really, really went after some schools that are taking the light touch and avoiding big games in the future. It's not too many schools, but it's a few out there that are missing big games, i.e. Alabama in 2019 with a date against Duke. That's their big game and nothing else for the Tide. Don't like to see that. All right, Justin Herbert, best in the country and probably number one pick. Yeah, I just saw a mock draft. I saw several mock drafts that had Herbert right at the top of the board. I can't say that I've seen him play a whole lot. I saw part of the Nebraska game and the bowl game against Boise State, in which they were buried early, made the valiant comeback, couldn't complete it at that point. But Justin Herbert is a kid to watch out for. I didn't realize he was that talented to be at the top of NFL draft boards for 2019. So it'll be interesting to see his progression. We've seen in the past guys projected that high, i.e. Matt Barkley, who had a marginal senior season and it dropped him all the way to the third round, and the Philadelphia Eagles, and he's never made an impact in the NFL. All right, an NCIS fanatic, of course, loves to let us know anytime we bring up the Pac-12 and USC in particular. Cotton Bowl score 2018. Let's see, was it 24-7? Yeah, I think it was 24-7. Ohio State 24, USC 7. So that just must make you feel good after years of drudgery and misery and that long drought for the Buckeyes against USC. They lost 2 of 3 Rose Bowls during a stretch in the 70s. Then they lost the 1980 Rose Bowl, 85 Rose Bowl. USC won back-to-back games in 1988 and 89, or 1989 and 90. And then they had the back-to-back games in 2008 and 9. The first went USC's way in a big way, 35-3. Then the Buckeyes came back, looked like they were going to win at the shoe in 09. And Barkley led the 92-yard drive down the field to win at 18-15. And this was the first game that the Buckeyes were able to get some revenge, a bit of revenge, after that long USC winning streak against Ohio State. All right, I don't think we had beaten them since 1973. So, yeah, I'll take it back to the 1969 Rose Bowl. OJ, the Heisman Trophy winner. USC seemed to have the best talent in the country, came in number 1. Woody's team knocked him off with that great sophomore starting cast of Rex Kern, Jack Tatum, and the like, and won 27-16 at the Rose Bowl, and Ohio State won the national championship. Then they had a string of 3 consecutive meetings in the mid-70s, 3 straight Rose Bowls. USC won the first matchup. They won the third matchup. So the last time Ohio State beat USC before last January was the middle game at the Rose Bowl, and the Buckeyes put a stomping on them, 42-21. And if you've seen the documentary on the Big Ten Network, it's a really good one, in which Ohio State and Michigan tied that year 10-10. So both teams were undefeated going into the game. Michigan seemed to outplay Ohio State, but their starting quarterback was hurt near the end of the game. They missed 2 field goals that would have won the game. So many people thought Michigan was the better team, but they tied 10-10. There was a vote by Big Ten athletic directors. One abstained. I forget who it was exactly abstained. The other 9 votes, the total of 9 votes went 5-4 Ohio State, and the Buckeyes went to the Rose Bowl and beat USC 42-21. The 2 games on the other 2 years that sandwiched that game, USC won one of those big, 42-17. The other one came down to a 2-point conversion that the Trojans converted to win 18-17. Fast forward a few years, and the Buckeyes again had a national championship in their grasp, had a 16-10 lead with Art Schlechter at quarterback, Calvin Murray, the big running back, Doug Donnelly at wide receiver, along with Gary Williams, number 44. You had a number of outstanding Buckeyes on defense, along with Marcus Merrick and the like. and Ohio State led 16-10 in the fourth quarter. Charles White ripped apart the defense on an 83-yard drive, dove over the top for the game-winning touchdown. USC stole the national championship from Ohio State 17-16, and actually Bama got the vote after defeating Arkansas at the Sugar. So that was the 1980 game. The 85 game, you had a star-studded cast for Ohio State with Chris Carter, Pepper Johnson, Chris Spielman. Keith Byers had a big 50-yard run in the first quarter, and Ohio State could not defeat USC. That was a 20-17 Trojan win in the 85 Rose Bowl. And then they didn't play until 1989 and 90. First game at the Coliseum, the Trojans were way too good, 42-3. Although if they would have played later in the year, I think Ohio State would have acquitted themselves. They got better down the stretch and met Auburn in a bowl game in 1989. Then in 1990, there was a lightning delay at the end of the game. USC led by 9. They didn't finish the game, and USC got the win 35-26. Fast forward to 2008. Todd Beckman's last start for Ohio State. He was pulled. Terrell Pryor comes into the game. USC was loaded with that great Pete Carroll talent and all that NFL talent on that team in 2008. And they beat the Buckeyes, just blasted them 35-3. It was close early, and Ohio State, with all the NFL talent they had, you wonder why they lost that game by 32 points. But that Trojan team just had it rolling for 3 or 4 years there. The next year, Matt Barkley leads the comeback down the field, and the Buckeyes lose at home 18-15. So there you've got the brief history of the last 30 years. So that's the last Ohio State win up until the sack fest of Sam Darnold in winning 24-7. All right, folks. Mario Cristobal trying to build an SEC team in the Pac-12. It worked out for y'all. Our freshman quarterback, Tyler Shaw, will be a player 2. All right. And if you have a suggestion for an Oregon contributor, media contributor that I can bring on Mark Rogers TV, we haven't talked much Oregon football since their run to the national championship game. Not a lot of Oregon talk here, so definitely we want to get to that. Jamie, we appreciate you jumping on board to talk Pac-12 Oregon, and we've talked up some USC Ohio State as well. Appreciate you guys jumping on board. We're talking Pac-12 scheduling and how I would fix it. I will be back soon within the next few days to fix non-conference scheduling. Appreciate you guys jumping on board. And if this is the first time you've run across Mark Rogers TV, and maybe you've watched me many times and have yet to subscribe, I ask that you would hit the subscribe button for the best in college football content. Appreciate you guys. We will see you next time.